Good morning, everyone. This is Father Nate, missionary priest in Italy, and thanks for joining us today, March 14th, on No Greater Delight, our podcast on Marian feasts and Marian meditations. We have a number of different locations. We'll start in France and then work our way briefly to Russia, and then to Chile. So today, the Abbot Orsini reminds us that they celebrate Our Lady de la Brèche at Chartres, where a procession takes place every year in thanksgiving for Our Lady's having delivered the city when besieged by heretics in the year 1568. It was during this siege, he writes, that the image of Our Lady, placed upon the Rousset gate, could not be injured by the cannon and musket balls which the besiegers fired at it, and the marks of which are still seen at 2 or 3 inches from the image. So again, this is quite a fascinating story. This procession that he speaks of took place until the French Revolution, right, when the procession stopped, and also the shrine itself was destroyed, right? So what happened? It's a fascinating story when the town of Chartres was under siege by the Huguenots, right? The Huguenots were said to have had the strongest and greatest army, the best soldiers in Europe, right? But this was the miracle, right? The defenders of Chartres placed above the gate of Rousset the statue of Our Lady de la Brèche, right? And so the enemies fired many shots from their cannons and muskets, but they could never hit it, right? And so, just to give you an idea of how many shots they fired, they said that the bridge of the gate was broken, cut in 2 by cannonballs, and everything around the image, within a few inches of it, you could see all the bullet marks even today, right? There's also another story, right, that says that the Huguenots actually approached a breach, like an opening in one of the walls, on March 9th. And then, as they were going to rush in, a grand lady stood before them carrying a child in her arms, right? So rather than trying to avoid the woman and child, they turned their guns directly at her. So they kept shooting and shooting, but they said they were enraged to see that even though they kept firing, they all seemed to be missing their target, right? Screaming foul threats, the Huguenots fired and reloaded and fired again, but the lady just seemed to be catching the bullets and collecting them in her apron, right? So the Catholics recognized this as the Mother of God, holding the child Jesus in her arms, and they took it to mean that they had personally taken up the defense of the city. So it encouraged them far beyond anything they had ever hoped for. So the priests, religious, and women began to pray as the men pick up their weapons and return to the fight, right? So it's very, very interesting, right, that was the case. So they say that, again, the chapel was destroyed during the French Revolution. The new chapel was started on April 7th, 1843. So also today they celebrate Our Lady of Kostroma in Russia. Apparently that's just a reference. We don't, not much information there. But interestingly enough, today they also celebrate La Virgen del Carmen in Maipú, Santiago in Chile, in South America. So it was February 11th, 1817, when the General O'Higgins, proclaimed Our Lady of Mount Carmel as the Patrona Generalissima de las Armas de Chile, like the patroness of the army, right? But a year later, Spanish forces pushed the Chileans back to Santiago, where on March 14th, 1818, residents and clergy joined the army in praying for heavenly help, right? Vowing that on the spot of the decisive victory, they would build a shrine to Our Lady of Mount Carmel. Now, their prayers were answered at the Battle of Maipú on April 5th, right? And so they decided to, start building as best they could. Construction was interrupted because of lack of funds, and then earthquakes, and earthquakes again. But on October 24th, 1974, the Church of Our Lady of Mount Carmel opened beside the old mossy chapel that was built the first thing, right? John Paul II named the sanctuary a minor basilica on January 27th, 1987. It houses a very beautiful statue of Our Lady of Mount Carmel. And John Paul II crowned the statue of Our Lady of Maipú on April 3rd, 1987. And on the weekend after March 14th, the town celebrates the Feast of the Promise, right? That vow that was made. It also hosts thousands of pilgrims on July 16th, which is, yes, the Solemnity of Our Lady of Mount Carmel, which seems to be still a national holiday in Chile. So that's what they're celebrating today in the Marian world on March 14th. For today's Marian meditation, taken from the book by Father Ildefonso Villar, we read the conclusion of Meditation 47 on the Holy Innocents. And here, this last point is entitled, The Divine Child. Here Jesus teaches us how the plans of men come to naught when confronted with his power and wisdom. You can see that in the easy way he dispels the designs and orders of Herod. He also teaches us, by allowing his cradle to be surrounded by the wailing of innocent children, that sacrifice is inseparable from his life, that all, even the innocent, must go that same way. Even innocence itself must be accompanied by penance. But see how in a moment the scene changes. What was sorrow and tragedy is turned into joy and glory. Jesus always triumphs after persecution. Who would not feel like following that eternal vanquisher? In his tiny hand, we can already see the power to dispose of the destinies of men. Lastly, ask Our Lady for light to detect your passions, for strength and will to overcome them. Passions duly checked might become a strong source of power. See, for instance, the determination which Herod brings to his evil designs. He stops at nothing. If he had placed this determination at the service of good, he might have been a saint. Direct your passions towards Jesus and Mary. Bring the fire of your love for them into devotion and loyalty to them. You will then easily overcome the hindrances that which bestrew the path of sanctity. For today's reading from the Admirable Heart of Mary by St. John Eudes, we read the conclusion of the chapter, A bundle of myrrh is my beloved to me. Let's hear what St. John Eudes has to say about this passage. How great is the love of the incomparable mother for the most perfect of sons! This mother holds the place of father as well as mother, and her heart is miraculously filled with paternal as well as maternal love towards him. His love is so great that if the love of all the human fathers and mothers that had ever been or shall be were concentrated in a single heart, it would be but a small spark compared to the furnace of Mary's love for her beloved son. He is an only son, the sole object of his mother's affection. He is an infinitely lovable and loving son, and she loves him without measure. He possesses all that is beautiful, rich, desirable, admirable, and lovable in time and eternity. This son is everything to his mother. He is her son, her brother, her father, her spouse, her treasure, her glory, her love, her delight, her joy, her life, her heart, her God, her creator, her redeemer, and her all. From this we may fathom the love of such a perfect mother for such a son, and consequently the most torturing and painful martyrdom of her maternal heart, when she sees him bathed in blood, clothed with wounds from head to foot, and so filled with pain in body and soul, that the Holy Ghost, speaking through Isaiah, calls him the man of sorrows. That's Isaiah 53, verse 3. The man entirely transformed into sorrow. We shall therefore not be surprised to hear St. Anselm thus addressing the Mother of Sorrows. All the torments which the martyrs underwent are as nothing, O Virgin, when compared to the immensity of the sorrows which transpierce thy soul and thy most loving heart. O sweetest heart of Mary, exclaimed St. Bonaventure, heart transformed by love, how you are now changed into a heart of sorrow, satiated with gall, myrrh, and absinthe. O admirable prodigy, he adds, your heart and mine are plunged into your son's gaping wounds, while your crucified Jesus dwells and lives in your inmost heart. We should not be surprised, therefore, at the revelation to St. Bridget, that the Blessed Virgin would have died of sorrow during the passion of her son, if he had not miraculously preserved her. And Mary herself, speaking to the same St. Bridget, says, I can presume to say that my son's sorrow was my sorrow, because his heart was my heart. O my queen, says St. Bonaventure, you are not only standing by the cross of your son, juxta crucem, but you are on the cross suffering with him, in cruce cum filio cruciaris. He suffered in his body, and you did suffer in your heart, and the wounds scattered over his body were gathered together in your heart. Finally, just as the love of Mary's maternal heart for her son Jesus Christ is past all that can be imagined, So the most painful martyrdom of her most amiable heart is beyond what thought can conceive or words express. Dulus nolor crudelior, nam nulla proles carior, non est amor suavior, non moreror est amarior, which says, no sorrow is more cruel than hers, for no son could be more dear than hers. If her love is most sweet, so is her pain the bitterest of all.
Hello, and we hope that you enjoyed listening to our Marian podcast. In the spirit of Saint Bernard of Clairvaux, we say to you that there is no greater delight than to spread the devotion of Our Lady. We hope you share these sentiments and encourage you greatly to share with a loved one. Know that you are always in our prayers, and we ask that you keep us in yours. God bless.